All right, Spartans, how you doing today? We have more sequence stuff to talk about. You should have with you a calculator and a writing utensil and your guided notes for this lesson. All right, now that we're ready to go, let's begin. Let's consider the sequence of 1, 3, 9, 21, 27, 81, etc. What is the rule that we're doing right here? Well, let me ask you this. How did I get from 1 to 3? We learned from yesterday that I could add 2 to get to 3. Can I do the same thing to 3 and get to 9? So, in other words, if I add 3 and 2, do I get 9? And you should know by now that you do not get 9. You get 5. So we need to think of something different here in order to get us from 3 to 9. Something that I also do from 1 to 3. So let me erase. I'll give you a second to erase on your sheets as well. But how do you get from 1 to 3? If I said you could not add 2 to 1 in order to get 3, how else could you make 3 out of 1? Pause the video, take a moment, and see if you can think of another way to turn 1 into 3. Okay, now that you're back, I hope you figured out that I can multiply 1 by 3 to get me 9. Or I'm sorry, to get me 3. And then, nicely enough, if I take that 3 right here, and I multiply it by 3, 3 times 3 also gets me 9. And here's the lovely thing, if I take that 9 and multiply it by 3, I get 27. And take a moment and think about, punch this into your calculator, what is 27 times 3? You should get 81. So, what is the rule here? What is the rule here? The rule is I multiply by 3 every time. Okay. Now, right here, I expect you to tell me what the next number in that sequence is. Again, if you don't have a number in this circled area, you are not going to get credit for your guided notes today. So, I want a number in there. Tell me what is the next number in the sequence. And then when you're done there, we will graph below. Okay, now that you're back, remember my numbers were 1, 3, 9, 27, 81, and your number right here. Okay, now, remember, just like last time, we're going to call this the 0th term, which makes this the first term, and this the second term, third term, and fourth term, and fifth term. And that number in red is your x value. The number in black will be our y value. So when I graph this, my first point is And I should have moved all this down, but I didn't. My first point, I'm going to put these in green, is 0. When x is 0, y equals 1. My second point is going to be when x is 1, right there, right? Y equals 3. And my third point is going to be when x is 2, right there, y equals 9. And then my next point, when y equals 3, or I'm sorry, when x equals 3, y equals 27. And then up here again, when x is 4, y equals 81. So I'm going to graph that point. And then when x is 5, and then this is your number right here. Okay, so now I'm going to graph those 5 points, and then you're going to graph the 6th point. You're going to graph this point on your own. I want to see that on your graph. All right, I'm going to graph mine in green. So when x is 0, y is 1. Well, where is 1? So here's x is 0, and that's also where y is 0. But look at this. 10 is only up that far. So how far up should I go? I can't really go far at all. I can only go a smidge above the line, because 1 is only a tenth of the way between 0, only a tenth of the way between 0 and 10. So it's really right there. And that's why I got a point so close to the line there. Now when x is 1, y equals 3. It's not much higher, maybe right there. And then when x is 2, now I'm getting off the line a little bit. Y is 9. When x is 3, I go all the way up to 27, so right about there. And boom. And then when x is 4, so I go over to x is 4, and then go up to 81. Now we're making some gas. Right there is where I put my point. So 4 and 81 right about there. And then you get to put in the 5th point, if you can. What I am going to do, though, is I am going to connect the dots with a gentle curve. Look at that. Look at that. So, now I'm going to give you the equation for this sequence. So, we're going to say y equals, and my first number was the number 1. And what was I multiplying by every time? Well, I was multiplying by the number 3. Now the question is, how many times was I multiplying by 3? I'm going to move these down a little bit because I got some new things to show you. How many times was I multiplying by 3? Well, when x was 1, and I'll bring your attention up here, when x was 1, I multiplied by 3 one time. When x was 2, I multiplied by 2, or I'm sorry, I multiplied by 3 2 times. When x was 3, I multiplied by 3 3 times. And let's go up. When x was 4, I multiplied by 3 4 times. So this, the shortcut way of writing multiplication over and over again, is to write it as an exponent. So I'm going to put my x up here. And this guy right here, actually I don't want to do that in green, I want to do that in blue. This right here means 3 times 3 times 3 times, and I want to do that x times. So whatever x is, that's how many times I'm multiplying 1 by 3. All right, kids, let's move on to the next page. We're going to consider this sequence. So now I got something going down. All right, I'll do this. So I'll give you a hint. This is multiplication as well. Oh, I didn't want that. So this is multiplication as well. What do I have to multiply 128 by to get me 64? Well, before I do that, think about division. What do I divide 128 by to get 64? I divide by 2. 128, do it in your calculators. 128 divided by 2 gets you 64. Similarly, if I divide 64 by 2, do I get 32? You do. And 32 divided by 2, you get 16. Okay? However, I don't want to use division. I want to use multiplication. Okay? So, similarly, what is the same thing as dividing by 2? I take the same number, instead of dividing it by 2, I multiply it by 1/2. So take 128 and multiply it by 1/2. See if you get 64. Take 64, multiply it by 1/2. Do you get 32? Take 32, multiply it by 1/2. Do you get 16? So what's the rule? The rule is I multiply by 1/2. So now, what would the next two numbers in the sequence be? I'll give you the first, and you find the second one. So the first one, I take 16, and I multiply it by 1/2. And 16 times 1/2 is 8. So 8 is one of my second numbers. You're going to find the next one by applying the rule. You multiply by 1/2 every time. Okay, now you're going to graph the numbers. Now remember, this is, I want thinner pen. This is n equals 0. This is n equals, why do I do n? I want x. X equals 0, x equals 1, x equals 2, x equals 3, x equals 4, and this is also x equals 4. And then this one here would be x equals 5. Okay? So my first point is going to be, and I'll do this in green again, my first point will be 0, 128. My second number would be 1, 64, right? 164. My third number, is going to be 2, 32. My fourth number is going to be 3 from right up here, right? That's 3 and 16 right there. So it's going to be 3, 16. And then my fifth number is going to be 4, 8. 4, 8. And then you got to find the fifth number, right there, and I'll circle that in blue as well. So, those are the numbers I'm graphing. So, over here, when x is 0, I got 128. So I got to go clear up from 0, clear up to 128, almost to 130. And I put a dot right under 130, right there. And then the second number, 1 comma 64. So I go to 1 and go up to 64. And I put a dot there. And then I go to 232, just over the line. 232, right there. And then I go to 316, right about there. Right there. 4 comma 8. And then you find the last one. And I will connect these dots all the way through 4. And then you connect it the rest of the way. Again, if this isn't done, you will not get credit. Now, I want you to consider this one. This is a funky one. We're going to go over this specifically because this will trip you up if you're not paying attention. How can I make 6 turn it into a negative 6? I can add something, I can minus something, or I can multiply. Pause the video, think about it. On this half of the side, I want you to put your rule, right? My rule. And then over here, I want you to put Mr. Cook says, and I want both of these spots filled in, okay? Both these spots aren't filled in, you no get credit. All right, now that you're back, oh, I don't want to do that. I just want to erase, oh, snap. I want to do that. No. Okay, I'll just have to do it again. Mr. Cook says I multiply by -1. So if I times this by -1, 6, I'll write this on top, times -1 equals, just flip the sign, that's -6. What about -6? If I multiply that by -1, remember Mrs. Driscoll's treatment, boom, boom, that equals +6. So times -1 equals +6. And then times -1 again gets me -6. And then times -1 again should get me +6 again. So my rule is my multiply by -1 every time. So now, here's the fun part. And I don't need a spot right here. I don't care about this because we just did it. But when x is 0, y is -6. I want to do this in blue. So when x is 0, when x is 0, y is 6. So I'm going to put a dot there. Now, when x is 1, I multiply by -1 one time and I get -6. I'm going to put a dot there too. When x is 2, I multiply by -1 again, I get a +6. And then when x is 3, I multiply by -1 again, and I get -6. Now, you might want to draw lines. Don't do it, but you might want to draw lines to and from. Don't do that. This is not how this graph behaves, and we'll go over that in a little while, but don't think that you can just draw a line connecting these dots, because it doesn't work that way for this one. Okay? That is all for today. Thank you for your time.